this is something to really think about. I wrote in addition to the PowerPoint, I wrote an article for QST. I do want to, oh, by the way, I should point out, Andre Hansen, K6AH, has an article in this month's coming QST on the Arden network. And Randy's got...
I've got a printout of it from this month's QST.
Outstanding. I have yet to read it.
The digital edition is out already.
Right. And what one of the things I think they're, from what I was talking to the editors up at the league, they wanted to have his article go out to talk about Arden, and then this will follow as a shorter article at some point in a subsequent issue, just to keep the momentum and the focus of the Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network software and mesh approach in the minds of the amateur radio community. But in addition to the article, in addition to the PowerPoint that you largely saw, I sent them an article, and I excerpted 11 skills. And I started this talk by pointing out that you really need to have, a really interesting set of skills. Now, in all fairness, not all of us walked in with these skills, but we all became a lot more skilled at most of them as a result of this. So whether it was Randy, who didn't attend the event but helped us, get organized and facilitated a lot of equipment and such, Mark, Dave Henninger, and even Hillary, who again, she actually did work the marathon, but she worked as a voice operator on some milepost, I don't know where. And then there's truly, we all became much more fluent in a variety of technologies and expertise. So you have to know about Arden software. You will sort out DHCP servers. I will not bore you with a VLAN, but let's just say that allows you to have a logical wired network. You're sharing the same wire or the same radio channel, but they might as well be on different cables. Think of it that way, virtual local area network. But getting those straight is important. Propagation at UHF and super high frequencies, and the likelihood of intermodulation and other RF congestion issues. I talked about the congestion. I didn't talk about the IMD. So what is IMD? I also could talk about harmonics. So the IMD are basically the sum and different products of frequencies that you're on. So for instance, let's say, we'll just think about the 2 meter band, something simple. 2 times one repeater's frequency minus another repeater's frequency could end up being on the input of yet a third totally innocent repeater's frequency. And all of a sudden, they're hearing voices that are operating on another repeater. 2x minus 1y equals some other portion. 3x plus or minus 2y or 1y could produce something else, etc. Maybe you get involved in public safety and things like that. So intermodulation basically are sum and difference products in multiples, all doing their arithmetic permutations. The other thing is harmonics. You could have something that's totally innocent. Give you an example. There's some 70 meg wireless stuff out there that's on top of the broadcasters, and that renders 2 meters virtually useless in Manhattan during the marathon, which is why they don't use 2 meters. They moved up to UHF years ago, primarily because of that, the need to avoid jammers, as Rachel alluded to before, and of course the ability to have really sharp filters in the form of cavities that you can use to eliminate signals that are not welcome on your repeater. So learning about that was good. AC mains and 12-volt power systems, including battery backups. You will learn about that because you have to figure out how long this is going to work on the batteries you have. You know, when you lose AC power, you know, you're going to want to know, okay, how much time do I have before this whole thing goes legs up? Voice over IP and asterisk all-star switch configuration.
What?
Yep.
Rachel?
One other thing with IMD in Manhattan specifically is the fact that your signal bounces around, so it has multiple paths, and those two signals can interact and interfere with each other, sometimes causing something that sounds like an echo, but sometimes canceling out. So
Sure.
That's another type of IMD that you have to be aware of, and we have to care for when we're doing this type of operation.
Yeah, and by the way, when we, as time goes on and we continue our rapture with DMR, it's going to be that much more fun to figure out, because, you know, it'll just be a mess to try to sort that out, because, you know, if things come in out of phase, like you were suggesting, you'll get nothing. I mean, you'll literally get nothing, and it's going to become more of a confounding exercise. I mentioned the all-star switch before, kind of at large. You will learn how to build all sorts of cables. Oh, we need a cable to go from here to here. So, you know, we probably made, you know, a bunch of Ethernet cables, both in advance and in the field. We made power cables. We made extra cables for. We actually had some USB cables we had to make or make up and use. Andre?
I was going to say, with the network cables, best way to practice is to start with at home, setting them up for your computer.
Yeah.
That is the easiest way. I learned how to do it in maybe like 2 weeks' time.
That's right. And crimping, you know, crimping an Ethernet cable is an acquired art, and the real trick is to make sure you have the right wire with the right kind of connectors, because they're both stranded and solid wires and connectors. And just for fun, there's different insulations, there's slightly different gauges of the wire, and your connector, you know, mileage will vary with that. And also what kind of clamping, and do you want grounding, and do you want shielding, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So it really becomes an interesting question. We also had to make sure things would function should the weather get bad. I mean, we couldn't just put stuff out there. Now the good news is I can take a node like this and put it out in the rain. That's good. And well, it's here, I'll show here. You can see that there's a cover here that I've taken off, but that'll protect from direct rain and snow. So these are meant to be outside in the direct exposure to weather. But, you know, it's not clear to me that you know, if you leave the other side of the cable out there, that water's not going to trickle in and go up the other side of the cable if you leave it on the ground. You have to make sure drip loops are maintained. You have to make sure that people don't drive a quad across or a forklift across your cables, because, oh, by the way, they did and they will. We were lucky enough. We were bulletproof enough in our installation that didn't become a problem. But we watched a broadcaster cry at one point, which was hilarious to watch. What did you just do? Ran over my cable. They ran over ours too. Our stuff still worked. Hey, life is good. Frankly, because we put ours into the gravel, and the other person just laid it up on top and just left it there. It's like no trench, no protection, you die. You know, so attention to detail when you're in a hurry matters. Unit system testing, we beat that to death earlier. Packaging and logistics, making sure you have everything so that you can move it. We were parked 3/4 of a mile away from where we had to be. So there was a question as to whether or not we'd even get that close. And then magically we were able to pull right into the area right in front of the trailer on Saturday. And then at some point around noon, we had to have the vehicles out, but we could still have all our gear in the park. And then they gave us, they literally had a park, what they call a closed parking lot at Park Ferme, which was guarded by the NYPD. The most wonderful people in the whole world. I ultimately are the New York police. But these guys took very good care of our cars. There was nothing. And we left stuff in the cars, no problem. Last thing is you need to be able to communicate. This deck has 7 or 8 released versions that started with a phone conversation with Gordon, we would like. And those requirements changed and evolved during that time. So to be clear, we documented things and sent it out constantly. I mean, if you've done agile system development, any kind of rapid prototyping, anything like that, all of those kinds of skills, you know, all kick in big time. And the last time is you have to be willing to be in leadership. You sometimes have to say that it's everybody's responsibility to lead, and it's everybody's responsibility to, when they see something that needs to be addressed, to take the initiative. And in that space, lead, communicate, and execute based on what's emerging, so that way you stay out of trouble. I mean, there was a whole, whole mess of other folks, who were there. I mentioned Commander Scott, who's KC2, what's his call, Nance? Commander Scott?
Oh, ION.
ION. KC2 ION. Brand new minted ham just a few months before the marathon. And yet he got it. He'd worked with us at the Passaic County Fair. I mean, this was essentially a derivation of the Passaic County Fair team that went back to the marathon. Because all of us had worked the marathon at one point or another in our lives, maybe multiple times. So it was really important. But I highlighted these points in my article for QST, and it's actually more important than any of the technology is the ability to be a bit of a jack of all trades, and if you're not a master of it, know who is. And also be willing to step up and become more masterful than you are now. You might be a masterful at T0, but at T final, you will be master enough, so you will be the expert. And that's what you all are as hams. I mean, I know most of you very well, and most of you have that innate ability, and you've executed on that point before. So, give yourselves a round of applause, really. Any more questions? Andre.
Okay.
Whenever it's yours.
Okay,
Bennett?
Just a quick question, I stepped in late, I'm sorry.
No
All
problem.
of this equipment is user supply?
Oh, yeah. Every inch of it.
So what would happen if there wasn't amateur radio to accomplish this?
So you're raising a really interesting question. There was a point going back, I guess just prior to the Bloomberg administration, where NYPD made it abundantly clear to the roadrunners that under no circumstances would the New York City Marathon proceed without the amateur radio population. Because there were, and that goes back to Gary's time.
I think that was actually back around 1985.
That's the first time it raised its head, but what my point was saying, yeah, you're right. That's actually when Mendelsohn got up, because there was a move to take, the amateur radio component and discharge them into oblivion. Keep in mind that the amateur radio regulatory environment in 1985 was significantly different than it is today. There were things that we did that were right at the edge of what we could legally do, and without violating what the rules were at the time, we provided an amazing amount of information and intel to critical agencies, most notably NYPD. In a post-terrorism world, it is every layer you can get that has eyes, ears, and bodies who have a clue on what's going on that course anywhere are absolutely essential. So now the issue is not so much, the city wondering whether we should have ham radio operations. They didn't want to credential us back in '85. It was the city that had that, right? And NYPD overruled some
The Roadrunners came up with an idea
Oh,
that they were going to rent a couple hundred HTs and a community repeater to do this all on.
A community repeater.
Right.
Wow.
And use their people, let them talk all they want on the radio. And they tried it with, I think it was the Fifth Avenue Mile, which is a 1 mile race, takes 10 minutes and it's over. It didn't come out too well.
Right, well, let me put to that point, Gary, they did rent the best part of 800 radios for this event, for their people.
Right.
And from what I heard, people monitoring, those circuits were a mess. And the amateur population still far exceeded that. And
That is what happens when you have people who are not communicators, people that are users on a radio circuit. You have people
That's right.
that don't know how to communicate their message in a timely fashion, and they
well, they
go
don't
over
listen
things.
either. One of the reasons why we developed such a deep shadow network, meaning they're amateur operators who are assigned to key personnel in the Roadrunners, and they were shadowed, and if they're not in the race control center, their shadow, lives on their butt, literally, and walks around with an HD listening, because the person they're shadowing isn't listening to radio. They're being inundated with interpersonal, direct, in-your-face access. So someone's got to mind the radio for that person and bring stuff to their attention back. They do have a couple of very effective, what I'll call incident management types within the Roadrunners now. That's the good news. And a couple of them feel that they can do it all. And it's pretty clear from the way that the monitoring of the circuits went, their circuits went, that's not the case. It's no better than it was in '85.
That's not a technology thing, that's a user.
Yeah, it's a user problem. I mean, how far can you stretch one person's attention? They've got to make logistical decisions. They've got to monitor a radio circuit. They have to deal with people who are just endlessly glad-handing them, if nothing else. Just that level of distraction is just not feasible. So to their credit, the RCC isolates a certain component of the leadership cadre of the Roadrunners, so they actually have a management team, but it's not quite the same. That's for some of them, but the people who are at the finish line, the people who are running around, no, that's not going to work.
Would you say the majority of the communication was verbal and type was video combined? I noticed you had the camera.
Yeah.
What did video fit in?
We did run an experimental video circuit just so if nothing else we can see what was going on outside the trailer, so we wouldn't go stir crazy and not know whether the sun was up or down. Although we did have windows, that was there. But we were very loath to put more than one camera up because we didn't want to do anything that would compromise the available bandwidth of the system. This is our first time out, and so for next time we've been asked to support 3 or 4 other tents in Central Park with far more ambitious RF paths. Andre.
All right, I got 2 questions. First one is, did you see any changes with the weather, with the ubiquities, the information going back and forth, like 500 yards? And the other one is there any specific or special training needed if somebody wanted to come out and join the team that helps up in Arizona?
Is that a show question? So the answer to the first question is we did not see any, should we say, environmental conditions that would cause a major problem with the path. As I pointed out here, when you look across this 500-yard path here, our biggest concern was somebody putting a bigger box between that sector antenna right here and ours, which is about 10 feet higher than my head was, 15 feet higher than my head was taking that picture. So that's number one. It's not that long a path. I don't think weather in Central Park for the paths we're going to try to cover are going to be an issue. I think our bigger problem is going to be, what did someone park where, and what RF emitter did we not factor into our planning. I can tell you if we go to now a 5-site network, or anything, even a 4-site network, that we will probably rework the mesh very carefully. Now the good news is there are parts of where these other tents are in less RF dense areas. That crucible of the finish line, of which we're right next to, we're a couple hundred feet from it. I said yards, but it's really a couple hundred feet. That's RF hellhole. But once you get maybe even a quarter mile, certainly a half mile north, where there'll be other tents that we want to tie in, I think we'll be in good shape RF-wise. We just don't have the user density from an RF perspective that we have to worry about intermodulation. That finish line, because even at the finish line, by mid-afternoon, things were much calmer. I mean, we actually saw a big, challenge when the initial, when all the marquee runners come through. And we saw another one when, in the middle of the afternoon for actually a longer period of time, but it was less pronounced, where we had just a lot of people milling around, and that just killed us. I mean, but that was mostly on the cellular side. The problem is everybody's brother seems to turn on their hotspot, which is hilarious. It's like, you can data mine for hotspots all day. If I put in fact, we're going to do that next time. It's going to be we're actually going to put a separate set of sensors out there just to really just, data mine what the total RF ecosystem looks like, both from a user perspective at 2.4 gig and 5 gig, but also from an RF perspective. I'm going to see if I can borrow if you know what it is, a Rodian Schwartz ESMD. I'm going to probably just grab 100 megahertz of 2.4 and just have it endlessly streaming into a server somewhere, which is that's a whole other conversation. How I'm going to get that.
Gordon?
Yeah.
Just one or two last questions, because we've got a hard stop in the building tonight at 9 o'clock.
No
Just as an FYI. So.
The second part of the question, what qualifications or to volunteer to be part of
Okay,
that?
so the most reasonable thing to do is to, number one, if you have the interest and inclination, to get a couple of nodes, and we can give you some guidance on that. It's what we call basic MIMO devices. Not the ones that where your capital investment will be worthwhile. Get you on 2.4 gig and get you to play. If that's something you're interested in. If you're not interested in playing, I'll get you a sec. But you are interested in buying, but you want to play, then come down here when either Randy or I are here. We'll be happy to give you some tutorial and let you play with the building network here. The other is some smaller events. We're doing the fireworks, I guess, again. And last year, we didn't bring out too much mesh stuff, but we could. And we certainly, it's worthwhile to do, if nothing else, just for the exercise, right? And the other is possibly, if we decide again in the Memorial Day Parade, if we decide to run. Last year, again, we didn't at all. We ran in the parade. We actually dragged our club decided to be a presence in the parade. So that was a different thing. But again, we could do stuff there. And then the last event that comes to mind would be to participate in the Passaic County Fair, which is, I believe, the third weekend of August. And we are always looking for operators then. In fact, just go look Passaic County Fair 2017. We start on Tuesday setting up. Yes, ma'am.
I believe the question was geared toward, do you have any special requirements to be a volunteer?
Well, it's pretty much.
Stand up and don't fall down.
Training.
Pretty much.
Yeah, like
Can you
training.
push to talk? Do you have an amateur radio license? Can you push to talk? Are you willing to learn?
Well, that's part of it, yeah, and.
You just don't want you drooling on my microphone, okay?
Okay.
That's my only requirement.
And are you willing to commit to the time?
Yeah, you gotta
Yeah.
commit to the day, you
That's
know.
what I was mostly hearing.
Yeah, and by the way, I hate to say it, but a lot of this is done in advance, and a lot of this stuff is hurry up and wait. A lot of this is a lot of setup early and tear down late, and then get to repeat it the next day. Garrett Mountain provides a rather unique environment in that it has lousy cell coverage. Who would have thought? No, nobody wants a cell site in their park, but they want to put people there. Now they want to put thousands of people there. So it can be a challenge. Our claim to fame in the park is that when the sheriff's department, the prosecutor's office, and the state police all converge with their video assets, and they all go blank, as Nancy and Dave Henninger will say, they watch the world's most boring 5-day movie you've ever seen, watching surveillance cameras from one end of the park to the other. And all of a sudden, the cellular supported cameras drop, and the amateur cameras are the only ones still working. And it's not a distance factor, it's just the public safety cameras are all on cell frequencies. So that causes a problem, to say the least. Ron?
Any idea how Boston covers their marathon, particularly after what had happened over there?
They have never had as significant an amateur radio presence at the Boston Marathon or the Washington area Marine Corps Marathon. And in fact, if you know Bill Peters, he used to live down in the DC area, and he says, I don't understand why New York has 400 operators at the marathon, and Marine Corps Marathon, we do it with about 40 people. Yeah, they do it with 40 people and 70 platoons of National Guardsmen, federal assets that are non-uniformed, and miscellaneous other services, including the Corps, show up in force to support that. So yeah, they have assets that rival New York's post 9/11. They really do.
Gordon, how many people run in the Marine Corps Marathon?
I believe it's 15,000. I think it's 15,000 now.
Oh, they're up to 15?
We can go up to
All right,
40,000.
so let me tell you a
There's
couple
no
of
comparison.
So during the Koch administration, we were told we could not have more than 21,000 runners. So that's when Fred LeBeau decided that fine, we'll use alphas, numerics, and we'll just add more colors. So it was blue, green, red, right? Blue, green, red.
Same numbers.
And then they didn't include any of the VIP runners, any of the special category runners were not counted in the population. So I got the green bar report, green bar wide format list of runners, and the people who showed up that day for runner dropout, these reports had 45,000 names on it. And the Koch administration said there were only 21 in the race. I mean, right, Gary? Remember that? Yeah. It was hilarious. Well, we knew better because back then, that's what we had to deal with. And the quality of the runners wasn't as good back then. There are fewer runners dropping out in a larger population than there were 30 years ago. It's fascinating. Any last question? Who knows the last question? No one.
I'll take it.
Oh, okay, you got one.
What did you learn? What do you learn? What do you do different each time going forward?
We don't have time for that.
Okay.
Well, as I alluded to, one is we're going to reoriginate our internet connection to the RCC instead of daisy chaining off off of the broadcasters as we had been assigned.
Thank you.
Good question. And a lot of other things too.
Gordon, I want to thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
Briefly, on behalf of ARC Project, I have brochures for those who'd like a little more information. And for those of you that are attending Hamvention next week, we have a very big present at Hamvention, including a keynote presentation on Saturday. There's information on the card for those of you that are going to Ohio next week. Thanks.
Gordon, we want to thank you so much.
My
The
pleasure.
club is always very
That's always-
appreciative of you.
Oh.
We'd like to present you with the present. I have a few notes. Inside I still have a fresh pot of coffee with cookies. I put up the listings for Memorial Day Parade to sign up, Street Fair, and the Field Day. It's all hanging up inside. If you want to join now, put your name up, and we'll eventually get our committees together and start rolling.
I will bring all of this stuff
Yeah.
to Portable Day tomorrow.
Very good.